Hey everyone, welcome back to CodeDesign Academy. In this video, I'll break down the fundamentals of the Flex property in Flexbox. This demo will be split into two parts. First, I'll show you the fundamentals of how Flexbox works, and then I'll drop in an element from the Sections tab so we can see how Flexbox helps with layout structuring in web design. Alright, let's start. As you can see here, I've added a large section. I've set the width to 100% and the height to 1000 pixels. Inside this section, I've placed a smaller div, and within that div, we have some text. Now, the interesting thing about this div is that its width is set to fit content. This means that if I change the content, like adding a longer text, the div will automatically resize itself. Let me show you what I mean. I'll duplicate the div and add a bit more text. As you can see, the div adjusts its size based on the content. Now, let's duplicate this div a few more times and create 5 blocks in total. So here we are, 5 blocks have been created. But as you can see, these blocks aren't structured very well. If I wanted to adjust their position or change their layout manually, I would have to go in and individually move and resize each one. That's quite tedious, right? This is where Flexbox really shines. So let me introduce you to Flexbox. Flexbox was introduced to allow developers to organize elements in a way that's flexible and efficient. It works based on how many elements you have and the available space, arranging everything in a structured manner. Now, let's enable Flexbox. I'll go to the Sections display settings and set it to Flex. As you can see, once I change the display setting to Flex, all the elements inside the section automatically adjust according to Flexbox properties. Right now they're centered because the properties are set to follow this layout. To make things clearer, I'll rename this section Flexbox, and these blocks are now going to be managed by the Flexbox properties. If you want to adjust the layout further, you can head over to the Alignment Flexbox settings, which are found under the Layout options. Here you'll find various settings like Direction, Wrap, Justify Content, Align Items, Row Gap, and Column Gap. Let's start by changing the direction. Right now it's set from left to right. I can change that to top to bottom, and as you can see, the blocks now stack vertically. I can also switch the direction to right to left, or even bottom to top. Flexbox allows for very flexible direction control, depending on how you want the elements to flow. Next, let's explore the Wrap property. At the moment, the section's width is 100%, but let's reduce it to 70%. Notice how the blocks start overflowing from the container. By setting the Wrap option to Wrap, the blocks will automatically shift to the next row, giving everything a neat and organized look. You also have a Reverse Wrap option, which rearranges the elements in reverse order, going from bottom to top. Now that you're familiar with the Wrap property, let's move on to the remaining settings. I'll restore the Flexbox width to 100% so we can continue exploring. Now, let's move on to the Justify Content setting, which controls the spacing between the elements in a Flex container. There are several alignment options. For example, you can align everything to the left, right, or center. And here, these 3 options will center the elements with 3 different spacing options. This one option evenly distributes space between the elements, but leaves no gap between the elements and the edges of the Flexbox. The second option adds equal gaps on both sides of all elements. You'll notice that the gap between the elements appears twice as large compared to the gap between the edges and the elements. This happens because each element contributes to the gap on both sides, effectively doubling the space between the elements. Finally, the third option spaces the elements evenly from one edge of the Flexbox, through the elements to the opposite edge. Now, one of the most powerful features of Flexbox is that it's dynamic. Let me show you what I mean. I'll change the text in one of the blocks to a longer word. As you can see, the layout automatically adjusts to accommodate the longer text, and the spacing between the blocks changes accordingly. This dynamic adjustment wouldn't be possible without Flexbox. Finally, we have Align Items, which controls how the elements are aligned vertically within the Flex container. Right now, it's set to center, but you can also align the blocks to the top, bottom, or stretch them to fill the container height. You can further adjust row and column gaps to control the spacing between rows and columns of elements. Imagine that I introduce a new element into this. Let's say I duplicate something here. As long as I add new elements, what happens is that everything will automatically arrange itself based on the structure we defined in the Flexbox or alignment section. Next, I'm renaming all the elements that we just duplicated. As you can see, everything is taking up space as needed. The alignment, justify content, and other settings will depend on the direction you choose. For example, if you set it from left to right with wrapping enabled, the layout will adjust accordingly. That's pretty much how Flexbox works. I hope you now have a good understanding of the basic principles of Flexbox. Now let's dive into how Flexbox can be useful in real-life scenarios, like arranging multiple elements on a web page. I'm going to drag and drop a template from the design library into the builder. As you can see, the elements are structured in a way where their size adjusts systematically as they move up and down on the screen, depending on the available space. Now, if you take a look, all the elements are placed inside a Flex container, which controls the size, position, and overall arrangement. Let's take a closer look at how the elements are organized within this section. If you check the alignment settings of the container that holds everything, you'll notice it's set to a direction of left to right. Additionally, there's a wrap property applied, and the align items and justify content settings are configured alongside a column and row gap of 20 pixels. Now let's try changing the wrap setting to no wrap. As you can see, the elements are structured but now overflowing. The wrap property does a great job of keeping everything in place, and if I reverse it, you'll see the elements rearrange themselves accordingly. That's basically how wrap works. It's currently using the full width, so there isn't much extra space available. But let's try adjusting the width of the container. I'll go ahead and remove the maximum width limit and set the width to 100%. Now you can see the container is at full width. Let's also experiment with the justify content property. At the moment, everything is aligned to the left. However, it's not sticking together because we've already defined a row gap and column gap of 20 pixels each. If we increase that to 30 pixels for both, you'll see the changes reflected on the canvas. So now, with a 30 pixel gap, when we modify the justify content attribute, the elements will reposition accordingly. If I center them, you can see everything shifts neatly to the center. I hope that's clear. When viewed on a mobile device, the smaller screen size causes the elements to wrap to the next line, ensuring they fit neatly within the container. As you can see, the view remains intact, and nothing is broken or out of place. That's the power of Flexbox. If you have any further questions or feedback, feel free to reach out through the support chats, CodeDesign forum, or our social channels. Thank you for watching and have a great day.